At sunrise, a lonely rancher stepped outside his house and froze. 300 Apache warriors stood silently around his land, their weapons ready, all because of one small act of kindness the night before. His heart began to pound as the cold morning air touched his face, and every sound felt louder than it should have been. The land that once felt empty now felt alive with danger and judgment. He had lived alone for years, facing storms, hunger, and fear, but nothing had prepared him for this moment. His hands trembled as memories of the previous night rushed back to him. The dark shadows, the silence, and the choice he made without knowing the cost. He wondered if kindness was a mistake or a test. The warriors did not shout or move, they only watched. Time seemed to stop as the rancher realized that one simple decision had brought an entire army to his door, and his fate was about to be decided. This is the story of a humble rancher living alone on the edge of Apache territory, unaware that one decision would change his fate forever. His days were quiet and predictable, filled with hard work, dry winds, and long hours of silence. Far from towns and people, he depended only on his strength and patience to survive. Every sunrise meant labor, and every sunset meant another night of watchful fear. He knew the land was dangerous, not just because of wild animals, but because unseen eyes could be watching at any time. Still, he stayed, believing solitude was safer than trust. Memories of past losses kept him distant from the world, teaching him to expect nothing and own nothing. Yet deep inside, his heart was not cold. He believed that kindness still mattered, even in a harsh land. He did not know that fate was already moving toward him, waiting for the exact moment when his quiet life would be shattered by a single choice made in the dark. The rancher lived far from town, surrounded by dry land, harsh sun, and constant danger, trusting no one but his instincts. Each day tested his patience as he worked the cracked soil and repaired fences worn down by time and wind. Nights were the hardest, filled with strange sounds and the feeling that the darkness was watching him closely. He had learned to sleep lightly, always ready to reach for his rifle, yet he never fired unless there was no other choice. His past had taught him that survival meant staying alert, not cruel. The land had taken much from him over the years, including family, comfort, and hope, but it had not taken his conscience. That was why, on that quiet evening, when the sky burned red and the air felt unusually heavy, something inside him warned that the night would not pass like the others. As he walked toward the water trough, he noticed footprints that were not his own, deep and heavy, pressed into the dry ground. His breath slowed, and his muscles tightened, but he kept moving. Then he saw her shape near the fence, larger than any person he had ever seen, bent low as if the earth itself was pulling her down. Fear struck him instantly because he knew she was Apache, and her size marked her as a powerful warrior. Blood darkened the dust beneath her feet, and her breathing sounded broken. Every instinct told him to step back and hide, yet something stronger held him in place. He remembered what it felt like to be helpless, abandoned by chance, and that memory refused to let him turn away. Slowly, carefully, he removed his hat and placed it on the ground, showing he meant no threat. He filled a wooden cup with water and set it a few steps away, keeping his hands visible and his movements calm. The woman watched him closely, her eyes sharp despite the pain, ready to strike if this was a trap. Time stretched between them, heavy and uncertain. Finally, she crawled forward and drank, her strength returning with every swallow. The rancher felt relief mixed with fear because he knew this single act could cost him his life. When she finished, she stood tall, towering over him, and for a brief moment their eyes met. No words were spoken, yet something passed between them, a silent understanding rooted in respect. She turned and disappeared into the night, leaving the rancher alone with his thoughts and the cold weight of what he had done. Sleep never came easily, and when morning arrived, it brought the sound of many footsteps, slow and deliberate, circling his land. As he stepped outside, the sight of hundreds of Apache warriors stole the air from his lungs. He did not run or beg. He stood still, accepting whatever judgment awaited him, knowing that fear could no longer guide his actions. His heart raced, but his face remained steady, because deep down he understood that kindness, once given, must be faced without regret. One evening, as darkness fell, He noticed a massive shadow near his water trough, moving slowly and painfully. The air around him felt heavier with every step he took closer, and his heart beat louder than the insects singing in the distance. Moonlight revealed a towering figure struggling to stand, her frame broad and powerful, yet weakened by injury. He realized she was an Apache woman, far larger than anyone he had ever seen, and the sight sent fear through his body like fire. Blood marked the ground beneath her, and her breathing came in rough bursts that sounded close to surrender. He stopped several steps away, knowing that one wrong move could end his life. His mind warned him of danger, but his eyes saw suffering, and that difference tore him apart inside. Memories of loss, of nights spent begging the sky for mercy, rose within him, making it impossible to look away. Slowly, he lowered his shoulders and relaxed his stance, choosing calm over panic. He reached for a wooden cup, filled it with water, and placed it gently on the ground between them before stepping back. The woman's eyes followed every movement, sharp and guarded, yet tired beyond words. Time seemed frozen as she weighed his intentions, deciding whether this man was an enemy or something unexpected. At last, she moved forward and drank deeply, her hands shaking as strength returned little by little. Relief washed over him, but fear remained, because he knew what helping her could mean. When she straightened, her height blocked the moonlight, casting a long shadow over him. For a brief moment, their eyes met, and in that silence, respect replaced fear. She gave a slow nod, turned, and vanished into the dark land as quietly as she had appeared. The rancher stood alone, shaken by the choice he had made, wondering if compassion had just sealed his fate. Sleep escaped him that night, his thoughts circling the image of her wounded strength and unreadable eyes. At dawn, the sound of distant movement pulled him from his restless state. The ground trembled softly, not from wind or animals, but from many steady footsteps approaching together. As light spread across the land, shapes formed along the edges of his property, silent and unmoving. Warriors appeared one by one, filling the horizon, their presence calm yet overwhelming. The rancher stepped outside, his chest tight but his back straight, understanding that running would only dishonor his decision. He faced them without weapons raised, knowing that whatever came next was tied to the kindness he had shown without expectation. The silence grew heavy as a familiar figure emerged from the line, standing taller than the rest. It was the woman from the night before, now strong, proud, and unbroken. She spoke words he did not understand, but her tone carried gratitude instead of anger. The warriors lowered their weapons in unison, and in that moment, the rancher realized his life had changed forever. Fear loosened its grip as he understood that respect, once earned through compassion, could turn certain death into protection, and that a single choice made in darkness could reshape destiny under the rising sun. As he got closer, he realized it was a giant Apache woman, wounded, exhausted, and barely standing. The sight sent a sharp wave of fear through his chest, yet he forced himself to remain still, knowing sudden movement could provoke violence. Her size alone spoke of strength, but her posture revealed pain that even pride could not hide. One of her arms hung weakly at her side, and each breath looked like a struggle against fading strength. He sensed that she had traveled far while injured, driven by something stronger than fear. His instincts screamed that this moment would decide whether he lived or died, but his heart refused to let him retreat. He remembered nights when pain had nearly broken him, when survival depended on the mercy of time rather than force. Slowly, he placed his rifle against the fence and stepped back, keeping his hands open where she could see them. The silence between them grew heavy, filled with caution and unspoken meaning. Her eyes never left him, sharp yet tired, measuring his intent with every second that passed. He moved toward the trough and dipped a cup into the cool water, feeling the weight of his choice settle deep within him. With careful steps, he placed the cup on the ground, then retreated again, lowering his gaze as a sign of respect. For a long moment, nothing happened, and doubt pressed against his resolve. Then she moved, each step slow and deliberate, as if testing whether the ground would betray her. When she reached the water, she knelt and drank, and the sound of it echoed louder than any gunshot in his mind. Relief washed through him, but it carried fear with it, because kindness given without demand often carried unseen consequences. As strength returned to her body, she stood, towering over him once more, and he felt small beneath her presence. Their eyes met, and in that instant, something shifted, as though the land itself had paused to witness the exchange. She straightened her shoulders, gave a brief nod, and turned away, disappearing into the darkness without a word. He remained there long after she was gone, replaying every second, wondering whether he had just spared a life or invited his own end. Sleep came in broken pieces, haunted by the image of her wounded strength and silent dignity. When the first light of dawn touched the land, a deep stillness followed, heavier than the night before. Then came the sound of many footsteps, steady and controlled, circling his ranch from every direction. He stepped outside and felt his breath catch as warriors filled the land, their presence calm, yet overwhelming. He did not raise his weapon or run. He stood where he was, shoulders firm, accepting that the truth of his action would now be revealed. From among them, a familiar figure emerged, walking with strength restored, eyes clear and commanding. She spoke to the warriors, and though he did not understand the words, he felt their meaning settle around him like dawn light after a storm. Weapons lowered, tension eased, and in that moment, he understood that respect earned through compassion could change fate itself, turning a lonely ranch into protected ground and a fearful choice into lasting honor. Fear filled his heart. Helping her could mean death, but leaving her could mean losing his humanity. He stood frozen, caught between the warning of survival and the quiet pull of conscience, feeling both argue inside him without mercy. The desert wind brushed his face as if urging him to decide, and he understood that delay itself could become a choice he would regret. He took a slow breath, letting it steady his shaking hands, and chose to act without noise or pride. He stepped aside, placing distance between himself and any threat, and made sure his movements stayed clear and honest. His eyes softened, his shoulders lowered, and his posture spoke what words could not. He reached for the water again, filling the cup carefully, aware that even the sound of it could carry meaning. He placed it where she could reach without fear, then backed away and waited, allowing silence to become a bridge rather than a barrier. The woman watched him with measured attention, weighing his resolve against her pain, and he felt the weight of that judgment more than any blade. When she moved, it was with effort, but also with dignity, and the ground seemed to respect her passage. She drank slowly, as if savoring relief and testing trust at the same time, and he kept his gaze steady yet lowered, honoring the space between them. The night held its breath as strength returned to her stance, and he sensed that whatever followed would echo far beyond this moment. She straightened fully, towering and composed, and he felt a calm replace the fear he had carried. Their eyes met briefly, and in that exchange he understood that courage was not loud and mercy was not weakness. She turned away without speaking, leaving him alone beneath the stars, uncertain yet resolved, knowing he would not undo what he had done. Sleep arrived in fragments, each broken by thoughts of consequences and hope intertwined, until the sky began to pale. With the first light came a low rhythm of movement, controlled and deliberate, circling the land he had called home. He rose and stepped outside, feeling the air tighten with presence, and saw the line of warriors forming without haste or threat. He did not reach for his rifle or hide behind walls. He stood where he belonged, open and still, prepared to face the meaning of his choice. A figure advanced from the gathered ranks, familiar in height and bearing, now steady and whole. She spoke with authority, her voice calm, and the warriors listened as one. He could not understand the language, but he understood the outcome as weapons lowered and tension eased. Respect settled over the ranch like morning light, quiet and complete. In that moment, he learned that humanity preserved in fear could return protection in daylight, and that a single decision made with compassion could transform danger into belonging, shaping a future he never expected but would forever honor. Choosing compassion over fear, he offered her water, stepping back with respect and no weapons. He waited in silence, aware that patience now mattered more than courage, and every second stretched like a test of intent. The woman's gaze stayed fixed on him, sharp yet uncertain, as if searching for the smallest sign of deceit. When she finally moved, It was slow and deliberate, each step measured, her strength rebuilding with quiet resolve. The sound of water touching her lips felt louder than the night itself, and he sensed the balance of the moment tipping away from danger towards something fragile and rare. He kept his posture open, breathing steady, letting the space between them remain untouched. The desert seemed to listen as she finished and straightened, the tension easing without words. A nod followed, subtle but meaningful, and then she turned and disappeared into the dark, leaving behind questions heavier than fear. He stood alone, absorbing the weight of what had passed, knowing the land remembered such choices. Sleep came unevenly, thoughts circling consequences he could not predict, until dawn arrived with a stillness that felt deliberate. The first footsteps were distant, then closer, steady and controlled, surrounding the ranch without noise. He stepped outside and saw them clearly now, warriors arranged with calm discipline, neither rushing nor threatening, their presence unmistakable. His chest tightened, yet his feet did not move. He understood that running would erase the truth of the night before, so he remained where he was, unarmed and upright. From the ranks, she emerged restored and commanding, her posture strong, her eyes clear. She spoke, and the sound carried authority rather than anger, shaping the air around them. He did not understand the language, but he understood the rhythm of respect as the warriors listened and waited. A pause followed, heavy and decisive, and then weapons lowered together, not as surrender but as acknowledgement. The land seemed to breathe again. She approached, stopping at a careful distance, and met his eyes without challenge. In that shared silence, he felt the meaning settle, that compassion had been seen and answered. The warriors shifted, forming a boundary rather than a threat, a quiet promise made without ceremony. He realized then that the night's choice had traveled faster than fear, carried by honor into the morning. The ranch no longer felt exposed, it felt recognized. He nodded once, not in triumph, but in gratitude, accepting what had been given and what would be expected. As the group turned away in measured order, the day brightened, ordinary sounds returning as if invited back. He remained still until they were gone, letting the lesson root itself where doubt had lived. Kindness, he learned, did not erase risk, but it transformed it, changing how danger arrived and how it departed. When he finally moved, the sun was higher, and the land felt different beneath his boots, as though a line had been crossed and a future quietly secured. The woman drank deeply, her eyes filled with surprise, gratitude, and unspoken pain. As the water eased her suffering, her breathing slowly steadied, and the tension in her shoulders softened, though her guard never fully dropped. The rancher stayed where he was, feeling the weight of her gaze as if it could measure his past and judge his future. The silence between them was heavy but no longer hostile, shaped by something fragile that neither dared to disturb. When she finished, she wiped her mouth with the back of her hand and straightened, her full height rising against the night sky, powerful even in exhaustion. For a brief moment, she studied him as if committing his face to memory, and he sensed that this meeting would not end with the darkness. She turned without a word and moved away from the trough, her steps slow but determined, disappearing into the open land where shadows swallowed her form. The rancher remained still long after she vanished, listening to the wind and questioning whether he had just altered his fate beyond repair. Sleep came only in broken fragments, filled with images of her eyes and the quiet strength they carried. Before dawn, an unfamiliar stillness settled over the land, deeper than the silence of night. As light crept across the horizon, a low vibration reached him, subtle at first, then unmistakable. He stepped outside and felt his breath tighten as figures emerged from every direction, moving with purpose and restraint. Warriors filled the edges of his land, their presence calm, but that left no doubt about their control. He felt fear rise again, sharp and honest, yet he did not reach for a weapon or retreat into his home. Instead, he stood in the open, grounded by the truth of what he had done. The warriors waited, unmoving, their discipline more unsettling than noise. Then she appeared among them, no longer wounded, her posture strong, her presence commanding attention without effort. She walked forward, and the land itself seemed to make way. She spoke, her voice steady and clear, carrying authority shaped by experience and honor. Though he could not understand her words, he understood their weight as every warrior listened in silence. Time stretched as if waiting for judgment, and he felt the outcome settle before it was revealed. At her signal, the warriors lowered their weapons in unison, not as surrender, but as recognition. Relief washed through him, quiet and complete, replacing fear with understanding. She met his eyes once more, and in that moment he saw respect where death had once seemed certain. Without ceremony, the warriors turned away, reforming their lines and leaving as deliberately as they had arrived. The rancher watched until the last figure disappeared into the distance, the circle breaking without a sound. The land felt different now, marked by something unseen but lasting. He exhaled slowly, realizing that compassion had crossed a boundary violence never could. What began as a simple act had reshaped the meaning of danger, proving that humanity shown in darkness could return as protection in daylight, and that a choice made without witnesses could echo through lives far beyond his own. Without a word, she turned into the darkness and disappeared, leaving the rancher uneasy and restless. He stood frozen for several moments, the night air heavy around him, listening to the wind whisper through the dry grass, as if the land itself were questioning his choice. Thoughts collided in his mind, fear mixing with a strange sense of responsibility he could not shake. He knew that helping her could have consequences far beyond anything he had faced before, yet abandoning her felt impossible, a betrayal of the part of him that still believed in mercy. Hours passed in restless anticipation, and sleep came fitfully, each moment haunted by the memory of her towering presence and the quiet dignity of her pain. When the first light of dawn crept over the horizon, the silence of the land was broken not by animals, but by the rhythmic sound of distant footsteps, slow and deliberate, carrying weight across the cracked earth. Heart pounding, he stepped outside and froze as he saw them emerge, dozens at first, then hundreds, their formation deliberate, silent, surrounding the ranch as if it had always belonged to them. Fear gripped him, sharper than any night wind, but he did not run or reach for his rifle. He realized that every choice he had made the night before led him to this moment, where courage and humanity would be tested against numbers and tradition. The woman appeared among the warriors, moving with authority and grace, her posture restored, every step deliberate, commanding respect without a word. She stopped a few paces from him, her eyes meeting his with intensity, carrying gratitude, understanding, and something unspoken that transcended language. The warriors shifted slightly, but did not advance, their weapons lowered in deference to her command. Though he could not understand the words she spoke, the tone alone conveyed a promise, a verdict that his act of compassion had been recognized and honored. Time seemed to stretch as he processed the enormity of the situation, realizing that one choice made in darkness had shifted the balance of power, turning potential death into protection. Slowly, the warriors began to withdraw, leaving him standing in the early morning light, the weight of what had transpired settling deep in his chest. The ranch, once isolated and vulnerable, now felt guarded, sacred, and transformed by respect earned rather than demanded. He exhaled slowly, the tension of the night fading, yet leaving a profound awareness that human kindness could ripple farther than fear, shaping destinies unseen. The woman lingered for a final glance, nodding slightly, a silent acknowledgement of his courage and mercy, before melting into the landscape, leaving him alone but forever changed. The rancher remained where he was, grounded by the lesson that one selfless act could rewrite the story of his life, proving that bravery and empathy, even in the loneliest places, held the power to alter fate and secure a future that once seemed impossible to dawn. The ground shook with footsteps, and distant war chants echoed toward the ranch. The rancher's chest tightened, his heart hammering as the sound grew louder and more deliberate, each beat matching the rhythm of his own fear. He froze, the morning light casting long shadows over the cracked earth, highlighting every detail of the land he had worked alone for years. The chants were low at first, a haunting hum that seemed to carry history, anger, and power all at once, then rising into a crescendo that shook his very bones. Figures began to emerge from the horizon, moving with precision and purpose, hundreds of warriors appearing almost as one entity, silent yet overwhelming. He did not reach for his rifle. The night before had taught him that courage could take forms other than weapons. His eyes searched for the giant woman, the one he had helped, and there she was, stepping forward, her posture strong, her gaze unwavering, commanding attention without any display of violence. The warriors halted behind her, forming a silent ring that left no escape and no threat beyond observation. The rancher's stomach tightened as he realized he was surrounded, yet the tension was not anger but judgment and expectation, as if the land itself had paused to witness what was about to unfold. He took a slow breath, keeping his body relaxed, aware that any sudden movement could misinterpret his intent. The woman spoke, her words foreign but carrying unmistakable authority, and the warriors listened, their eyes never leaving him. Time seemed to stretch, each second amplifying his awareness of mortality and consequence. Then, gradually, the warriors lowered their weapons, not as surrender but as acknowledgement, the gesture carrying weight beyond words, a recognition of the choice he had made in darkness. Relief mixed with awe as he realized that his act of compassion had shifted the tide of what could have been his end into protection. The woman's eyes met his once more, communicating respect, gratitude, and an unspoken promise that his life would no longer be alone or at risk. As she signaled the warriors, they began to retreat in careful formation, leaving the ranch quiet yet transformed, the land itself seeming to hum with the energy of honor and trust established without a single act of violence. He stood still, the morning sun warming his face, processing the enormity of the moment, the lessons of fear, kindness, and courage imprinted deeply in his heart. The ranch, once vulnerable and isolated, now felt watched over, sacred in its preservation, and he understood fully that bravery and humanity, even in the smallest gestures, could command respect far beyond any expectation. The echoes of the chants faded, leaving a profound silence filled with new possibilities and the quiet knowledge that one selfless act in darkness had forever altered the course of his life and the land he called home. The rancher stepped outside and saw hundreds of Apache warriors surrounding his home in total silence. His breath caught in his throat, and every instinct screamed danger, yet he did not move, rooted to the spot by a mixture of fear, awe, and disbelief. The warriors' presence was immense, their numbers stretching across the horizon, faces painted, weapons ready but held with discipline rather than aggression, their eyes steady on him, as if reading every thought he had ever harbored. The air was thick with tension, and for a moment, he felt time stop, the world narrowing down to the circle of vigilant figures that had silently claimed his land. He remembered the woman from the night before, towering, wounded, yet commanding respect, and realized she was among them, leading without a word, her posture powerful and unyielding. His pulse raced, but he did not raise his hands or a weapon. He knew that any sudden motion could be mistaken for hostility. The ground beneath his boots felt charged with anticipation as each second stretched, the sun climbing slowly, casting long shadows across the desert that only heightened the enormity of the moment. He could hear his heart hammering in his ears, matching the unspoken rhythm of the warrior's silent judgment. The woman stepped forward, her eyes locking with his, carrying an authority that demanded attention yet conveyed understanding. Though her voice was unknown to him, the tone spoke clearly of recognition, of respect earned through an act of courage and kindness that transcended language and tradition. One by one, the warriors lowered their weapons, a slow, deliberate motion that signaled acknowledgement rather than surrender, the weight of their decision pressing into the rancher's chest and easing some of the tension that had built over countless sleepless nights. Relief and awe mingled within him as he realized that his choice to help the woman, despite fear and risk, had reshaped the course of what could have been his end. He felt the enormity of honor and trust being extended toward him, a rare and profound gift in a world often ruled by survival alone. The woman gave a brief nod, her expression unreadable yet filled with meaning, and the circle of warriors began to shift, some moving back, some standing guard, their presence now protective rather than threatening. The rancher exhaled slowly, allowing the tension to release in waves, as if the land itself had accepted the balance restored by mercy and bravery. Sunlight spread across the fields, illuminating the dust and footprints of the warrior's arrival, transforming fear into a solemn awareness of what had transpired. He realized then that a single act of compassion could ripple outward, touching lives and commanding respect far beyond what he had imagined. That courage without violence could earn protection and reshape destiny, and that the quiet strength of a choice made in darkness had forever altered not only his life but the land he called home, leaving him standing amid the morning light, alive, honored, and forever changed. Believing this was his final moment, he stood still, ready to face whatever came next. Every muscle in his body tensed, his heart beating like a drum against his ribs, but he refused to show fear beyond the steady rise and fall of his chest. The circle of warriors tightened imperceptibly, their silence more terrifying than any shout or charge, and the wind seemed to hold its breath, carrying only the faint scent of dust and sweat. His eyes searched for the woman who had changed the course of his night, and there she was, stepping forward from the ranks, tall, commanding, and unbroken, every movement precise, every glance measuring him with an intensity that made his stomach twist. He knew she could have punished him or ordered his death, yet the calm authority in her posture suggested that she would decide his fate without haste, with judgment shaped by something deeper than anger or pride. The rancher's mind raced through every choice he had made. The step toward the shadow, the offering of water, the patience and silence. And he realized that this moment, suspended between life and whatever might follow, was the culmination of all those decisions. Her voice finally rang out, clear and strong, though the words were foreign, their cadence unmistakably commanding attention, and he understood through tone and presence that she acknowledged his courage. The warriors shifted subtly, not in attack, but in readiness to obey, their weapons lowering slowly, a gesture heavy with meaning that pressed against his chest and eased the tight grip of fear. He felt awe, relief, and a strange surge of pride all at once, knowing that survival here was now intertwined with respect, honor, and trust earned in the most dangerous way possible. The woman took another step, her eyes never leaving his, and the moment stretched, thick with unspoken communication that transcended language, a silent exchange of acknowledgement and permission. The morning sun climbed higher, painting the desert in gold and amber, yet he remained rooted, feeling that time itself had slowed to mark the significance of the act that had brought him here. As the warriors gradually adjusted their formation, some moving back, some maintaining a vigilant presence, the weight of their acknowledgement settled over him, a quiet shield against what could have been annihilation. He exhaled slowly, sensing the invisible line drawn between danger and protection, realizing fully that compassion had changed the rules of this encounter, that courage and empathy had carried more power than any weapon he could wield. The woman gave a subtle nod before retreating slightly, her authority intact, and he recognized the profound lesson unfolding. That one act of selfless courage could ripple outward to alter destiny, convert fear into trust, and transform isolation into connection. Standing there, bathed in the light of dawn and surrounded by warriors who once represented his potential end, he felt a shift deep within, a mixture of humility, gratitude, and enduring respect, understanding that the life he had feared losing had been preserved not by force but by humanity, and that this moment would forever redefine the meaning of bravery, mercy, and honor on the land he called home. The giant woman stepped forward. She was a respected warrior leader, and the rancher had saved her life. Every step she took carried weight, authority, and the quiet intensity of someone who commanded loyalty and respect through action rather than words. Her eyes locked on his, scanning him not with suspicion but with the profound recognition of a life spared, a choice honored, and a debt that would not be forgotten. The surrounding warriors shifted subtly, their formation almost imperceptibly tightening and loosening as if breathing in unison with her presence, yet not a single weapon was raised. The air itself seemed charged with expectation and unspoken understanding. The rancher remained perfectly still, his chest rising and falling steadily, knowing that any sign of hesitation or fear could be misinterpreted. Yet he also felt a strange calm settle over him, a quiet reassurance that the life he had offered kindness to was now reciprocating in a way he had never imagined. She stopped a few paces away, towering and formidable, and inclined her head slightly, a gesture both formal and deeply personal, acknowledging the choice he had made to act with courage and empathy rather than self-preservation alone. The rancher's mind raced, recalling every detail of the night before, every sound, shadow, and instinct that had guided him to this moment, realizing that every small decision had led to an outcome beyond his comprehension, yet rooted in the simplest act of humanity. The silence between them was thick, electric, filled with a tension that was neither hostile nor peaceful, but alive with the weight of consequence and respect. Slowly, she spoke, her words foreign to him, yet delivered with such clarity and conviction that the tone alone carried meaning, commanding attention, conveying gratitude, and issuing a silent promise that his actions would be remembered and honored. The warriors behind her echoed the unspoken sentiment, lowering their weapons in unison, a ritual of acknowledgement that spoke louder than any shout or proclamation, transforming the potential for violence into a shield of respect and protection. He exhaled slowly, relief and awe washing over him in equal measure, feeling the profound significance of what had transpired, understanding that courage paired with empathy could transcend fear and danger in ways he had never imagined. The woman stepped closer, still silent, and he noted the careful control in her movement, the quiet precision that marked a leader who demanded loyalty and inspired trust, her presence alone redefining the rules of the encounter. Sunlight began to illuminate the dust swirling around the warriors, highlighting the moment like a stage set for fate itself, and he felt the gravity of being recognized not just as a survivor, but as a participant in a story that balanced respect, honor, and life itself. Each heartbeat echoed in the still air, marking time as the circle of warriors subtly shifted, transforming from a threatening blockade into a protective perimeter, and he realized that the night's act of kindness had created a bond stronger than fear, one that would secure him not only safety, but an enduring acknowledgement from those who could have ended his life. Standing amid the morning light, surrounded yet unharmed, the rancher felt the full weight of humanity's power, learning that mercy, courage, and quiet action could reshape destiny, turning a potentially fatal encounter into a lesson in honor, trust, and the lasting impact of a single, selfless choice made in the dark. Instead of violence, the warriors lowered their weapons, honoring the rancher for his courage and kindness. A wave of relief and disbelief washed over him as he realized the magnitude of what had just occurred, the quiet acknowledgement from so many formidable warriors more powerful than any battle he could have imagined. The desert seemed to hold its breath, the early morning light stretching long shadows across the cracked earth, highlighting the gravity of the moment and the fragile balance between fear and trust that had been achieved. The woman who had once been wounded now stood tall and commanding, her eyes meeting his with a mixture of gratitude, respect, and unspoken understanding, and he felt a profound connection that transcended language or culture, a bond forged in the simple act of giving water to someone in need. Each warrior shifted subtly, forming a protective ring rather than a threatening wall, their presence transforming from menace into guardianship, a silent promise that his life and his land were now honored and protected. He exhaled slowly, the tension that had gripped him since the previous night easing as he absorbed the weight of their acknowledgement, understanding that fear had been replaced by respect, and that courage paired with empathy could produce results far beyond what brute force ever could. The woman took a deliberate step closer, her movement controlled and graceful, and the rancher noticed the way her posture commanded not only obedience but trust, a rare combination that spoke of leadership earned through wisdom and experience rather than intimidation. The sun climbed higher, illuminating the dust that swirled gently around the warriors, casting a golden light on a scene that could have been a battlefield, but had become a testament to humanity and the power of selfless action. He felt the enormity of what he had done settle in his chest, a mixture of humility, awe, and quiet pride, knowing that the life he had chosen to save had returned protection and honor in ways he could never have anticipated. The circle of warriors began to shift, some moving slightly back, others maintaining positions that suggested vigilance without threat, and the rancher understood that this new reality would not require constant fear or suspicion, but a respect that had been earned through simple, deliberate kindness. The woman's eyes lingered on him a moment longer before she stepped back, her expression unreadable, yet conveying everything words could not, a final nod of recognition that affirmed the bond created in the darkness. As the warriors slowly dispersed, the rancher stood alone, the land quiet except for the wind rustling through the dry grass. And he realized that his life had been irrevocably changed, that a single act of compassion had not only preserved him, but transformed the way danger, honor, and trust existed in his world. He allowed himself to breathe fully, feeling the sun's warmth on his face, absorbing the lesson that courage without malice, empathy without expectation, and humanity in the face of fear could shape destiny, create allies from potential enemies, and leave a legacy of respect and protection that would endure far longer than the moment itself, proving that the smallest acts could echo louder than the mightiest weapons, and that true strength often lay in mercy, honor, and the quiet decision to act with integrity when the outcome was uncertain. From that day on, the ranch was protected, a quiet fortress born not from walls or guns, but from courage and compassion. The rancher walked its land each morning, feeling the weight of what had changed, knowing that a single choice had reshaped his world forever. Every breeze that rustled the dry grass seemed to whisper respect, every shadow a reminder that fear had been replaced by trust. He no longer feared the unknown. Instead, he carried the knowledge that humanity could ripple farther than violence, and mercy could command loyalty stronger than threats. The memory of the giant woman, towering and proud, lingered in his mind, a symbol of honor repaid in silence and strength. Life continued with quiet routines, yet every sunset and every starry night carried the echo of that fateful moment. One act of kindness had turned potential enemies into protectors, transforming danger into a legacy that would forever define his home, his heart, and the land he vowed to cherish.